It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the first day of Tantrotsav 2021. We have Aravindan Neelakantan with us today. He will speak about the divine feminine through the ages in Shaiva tradition. Please give me a few more moments to introduce Aravindanji. Aravindan Neelakantan worked with Vivekananda Kendra Natural Resources Project. He co-authored the book Breaking India with Rajiv Malhotra. He is now a writer and a contributing editor at Swarajya magazine. You can drop your questions as a chat message, and if we have time, we will take some questions. Over to you, Aravindanji.
We are going to look at how the divine feminine is represented, particularly in the South Indian Saiva tradition. Now, essentially, there is no difference between the South Indian and the North Indian with respect to the spiritual tradition of India. It is the same. But just for our convenience and for our linguistic considerations, we are now looking at the South Indian tradition, particularly the Tamil tradition, in which the divine feminine is expressed. And we will also see, along with it, how it is in sync with the entire Pan-Indian tradition. In no way it is different or distinct from the Pan-Indian tradition, and it has also been an enricher of the Pan-Indian tradition. So, coming to the subject proper, the divine feminine is considered as the primordial basis of everything that is. It is the anishta, the adhisthana, the basis, the very substratum on which everything is formed. And because it is the substratum, it is also very importantly the unmanifest, the undefined element that is in every being, in every existence. So the word that has been used to represent this particular aspect of the divine feminine is avyakta. Now, there is always a kind of a confusion with respect to the term Maya. Most often, in spiritual traditions, we consider Maya as some kind of a negative entity. It is something that confuses, that keeps you in a kind of a subjugated manner from your real reality, your inner reality. And we consider it as something from which you have to release yourself. You have to come out. However, in the concept of divine feminine, in the tradition of divine feminine, we do not see Maya as a kind of an obstacle. Maya is something that allows us to penetrate through what can be called as the naive reality. What is naive reality? When you look at the reality around you, you accept it as you see it through your senses. Whatever you see through your senses, you accept it as real. You see a flower as red, and you accept it as the red flower. But little you penetrate into the aspect of the red flower, then you understand that the red flower, what is considered as the red flower, is something that gives out the red wavelength, but it holds in it all other wavelengths. In that way, what we see may not be the reality. If our sense organs are different, then the reality may be different. So, given this particular aspect, we have to penetrate this naive reality. How do you penetrate this naive reality? You do it through science. You can also do it through higher sciences like the spiritual discipline. You can do it through the outer sciences. You can also do it through the inner science. So essentially, the divine feminine forms the substratum of this universe, which is in a way Maya, but that Maya is not an illusion. The Maya is an undefined aspect of reality. It is undefined. So she is Avyakta. So in Sri Lalita Sahasranama, you have the name Mithya Jagadadhisthana. When you tell Mithya Jagadadhisthana, it means that she is the Adhisthana of the universe that is actually Mishra Prapancha, which is the combination of what appears to be and what really is. It is not completely illusory, it is not completely real. It contains both. And why she is this? Because she is Muktida. If you look at the sequence of the names in Sri Lalita Sahasranama, you will find Muktida, Mukti Rubini. So she is creating this Mithya Jagadadhisthana because she wants to give us liberation, and she herself is the liberation. Hence, here the Maya is, Maya, the another name that Adi Shankara gives to Maya is Avyakta. Avyakta Namni Paramesa Sakti. That is what he says. Trigunatmika, he says. Para, he says. So all these are the definitions of Maya. In Viveka Chudamani, these are all the descriptions he gives for Maya. So Maya essentially is not something that is kind of an enchantress who makes you deviate. In fact, she creates the situations in which you can actually go and realize the reality. Hence, this divine feminine is accepted in our tradition as the very basis of all things that exist, that manifest, and we are also told very clearly that everything that is manifest also contains in it an undefined element. There is a kind of an undefined element that comes along with the manifestation. So this undefined element and the manifest element, if you take the whole universe, then what our tradition says is that the undefined has an existence of its own, but whatever is defined, whatever is manifest, cannot exist alone. It will always have some component of the undefined. So undefined can exist on its own. That is why, again, we come to Sri Lalita Sahasranama, we have this Mula Pragati, Avyakta. Mula Pragati is one name for the goddess. Avyakta is another name for the goddess. Mula Pragati, Avyakta, Vyakta, Vyakta Swarupini. Then, if you go by the logic, then you should have Mula Pragati. After that, you should have Avyakta, and then you should have Vyakta. Mula Pragati, we understand. She is the root of the nature, the root nature. She is the root nature. And after that, you have Avyakta, the undefined, indefinable aspect of the nature. And after that, you should have Vyakta. But you don't have Vyakta. You have Vyakta, Vyakta Swarupini. And then, if you look at the sequence, it ends with Vidya, Vidya. Vidya as well as Avidya. She is both. And if you relate this to the Isopanishad, then you will find that Vidya and Avidya both are needed for liberation. Taking all this into consideration, we will find that in our culture, the divine feminine and also the manifest reality is seen as something that has to be explored in order to realize the divine feminine. This is one aspect. So she is very, very important. Now we come to 7th century. Well, in the 7th century, you have a great Saivite saint. He was a small child. His father was taking him to the temple pond, and the father was going to take his bath and do his daily rituals. As the father went inside and he was taking the bath and doing the rituals, the child started crying because the father has submerged himself into the tank water. As the child started crying, then the tradition says that the goddess came and gave the child the milk. We all know this. And then in the Saivite tradition, it is said when the goddess gave the child the milk, the child at once became aware of both the Paranyana and Aparanyana. So the milk of the goddess is able to give, the milk of the divine feminine gives both paranyana and aparanyana. This is another aspect. So the goddess is essential. If you want to realize the reality, the goddess is essential. In Saiva tradition, without the goddess, you can never realize the reality. In fact, we have evolved as a conscious beings in such a way that without the divine feminine, we cannot penetrate into the reality of things. This is how the entire structure has been created for us. And the goddess basically is some aspect that allows variety and diversity. Here, again, because in India alone, we have allowed the spiritual tradition has allowed the divine feminine to evolve to all its possibilities. The divine feminine has been present in all the cultures. Irrespective of what culture you take, the divine feminine has been there. For example, if you take the Jewish culture, there has been the Shekinah, which is the goddess, the divine aspect of Yehovah. And Yehovah himself is in some mystic traditions of Judaism, Yehovah himself is considered as androgynous. If you come to Christianity, in Christianity also the Shekinah tradition has survived. And there are Christian traditions in which, mystic traditions in which, the agony of Jesus is considered as feminine. And also, in the mainstream Christianity, what has happened is, unfortunately, the divine feminine has been subjugated to the patriarchal God system, a God who is present in the heavens above. So, in the case of Islam, it is even more complicated. The case of Islam, the divine feminine has been battled with, it has been destroyed to a large extent. Nevertheless, in India, what has happened is, this divine feminine has somehow survived. There have been, I can't call them Sufi songs, rather I would call them Islamic forms, songs influenced by Indian spirituality. So you have such songs in South India, for example, in which Allah has been depicted as a goddess. This is very rare. And in present situation, if somebody is going to publish even these things or even talk about these things, the person may face the wrath of the fundamentalists. So let us not get into that particular aspect. But the point I want to stress is this: the divine feminine has been present in all cultures, but the divine feminine has been present and has been explored to its full zenith only in Indian culture, only in, more specifically in Hindu culture. For example, if you take the Jain and the Buddhist traditions, again you find that, for example, a very good example is the Buddhist tradition. In Buddhist tradition, if you look at the earlier development, you will find that there has been no divine feminine. In fact, the feminine has been made subordinate to the masculine. But later, due to the influence of the Vedic tradition, the Buddhist tradition developed divine feminine to higher extent, and the bodhisattvas could be feminine. That transformation in Buddhism came because of the influence of Hinduism. That is another one aspect. Now we come to the Saivite tradition itself. Here, you find that the goddess sometimes, when worshipped by her devotees, can subordinate all other godheads, A very good example of this is given in Chilappadikaram. So in Chilappadikaram, the Kovalan and Kannagi, the hero and the heroine, they were moving, they have fallen in hard times. In fact, it is a very interesting thing. We can take the entire Chilappadikaram as a kind of terrestrial, mundane level expression of the divine feminine at all her manifestations, whether it is Madhavi or whether it is Kannagi. You can see both of them as expressions of the divine feminine. the goddess. But now we will come to this. So they have fallen on hard times. And so they were going through the forest. As they were going through the forest, they were crossing a particular area where the warriors, they are worshipping the tribes, the tribal hunters, they have gathered together. They are worshipping the goddess. There is a woman called Shalini, and this Shalini was having an altered state of consciousness in which the goddess has entered into. Goddess entering into the consciousness and manifesting herself is a theme that you see in the Vak Sutta of Rig Veda. In fact, the term commonly used throughout India is Avesam. Even in South India particularly, whenever somebody is possessed by a god or the goddess, we call it Avesam, and the word Avesam first occurs in Rig Veda's Vak Sutta. So the goddess manifests herself through this Shalini. And what does she say? It's a very interesting piece of words that Nanjundu Karutha Kandi, Venchinat Arav Nandu to Nedu Malay Valaitol, Ulai, Turaga Kachudai Mulaichi, Valayuday Kagan, Sulam Yendi, Karin Gurive, Portanangaki, Adi in Gurive, Megalayati, Silambum, Kalalum, Pulambum, Siradi, Valambad, Kuchat, Vaiva, Kuchavi, Grand Veru, Saranda Tola, Talemisi in the Tayal, Palatol, Mamari, Kumari, Kauri, Samari, Suli, Nili, Malavaki, Rangire, Aye, Sayaval, Vayaval, Tadake, பாய்களை பாவை பைந்துடி பாவை ஆய்களை பாவை அருங்கல பாவை கமர் தொலை வந்த குமரி கோலத்து அமரிளம் குமரியும் அருளினல் வரி குரு செய்கை வாய்ந்ததால் எனவே. I don't know how many of you people who are listening to this are Tamils, but I recited the whole thing because it has such a power. The first thing that here is said is, her throat is black. Why her throat is black? Because she had drunk the poison. Now, as we all know that in tradition, it is Shiva who had drunk the poison. But here, the poet says, Nanjundu Karutha Kandi, it is the Shakti, the goddess who had drunk the poison, and the word that is used is Neelakantan. For that, the word that is used there is Kandi. Essentially, it is the feminine form of Neelakantan that is used in here. So, Nanjundu Karutha Kandi, Venchirat Aravu non Puti Nedu Malay Valaitol Tule Yegi Turaka Kachude Mulaichi. Venchinat Aravu non Puti. Here, the incident that is said is about the destruction of the Tripura. Venchinat Aravu non Puti. So, when Shiva wanted to destroy the Tripura, he took the great Himalayas as his bow, and he made the cosmic serpent as its bowstring. Here, it is given to the goddess. Venjinath Arav Nanduti Nedu Malay Valaitol Tule Yei Turaka Kachude Mulaichi Valayude Kegil Sulam Yendi Karigin Urive Potananga Here Arivin Urive Megalaya. Now, she is wearing the hide of the elephant. This again relates to Shiva taking the elephant's hide, and when the elephant was sent to attack Shiva by the Targavan rishis, he just skinned the elephant and made it to his show. The same way, he also skinned the tiger and he made it to his cloth, the waist. So both are now here attributed to the goddess, and then it is said Chilambum, Kalalum, Pulambum, Sirat. She is carrying both the anklets that belong to the masculine gender and the feminine gender in her legs. So here you have the Ardhanariswara form, but the Ardhanariswara form itself is subdued by the feminine form. Usually when you tell Ardhanariswara, the androgynous form is subdued by the masculine form. Here, the androgynous form is subdued by the feminine form. And the most important thing is this. Yes, series of litany comes. Amari, she is deathless. Kumari, she is young. Gauri, she is white in skin tone. Samari, she is a fightress. Suli, she holds the trident. Neeli, she is black in color. Malavar Kilangli, she is the younger sister of Vishnu. Aye, Arya, she is the Arya. Such a woman, and at last it is said, குமரி கோலத்து தமர் தொழ வந்த குமரி கோலத்து அமர் இளங்குமரியும் அருளினுள் வரி குரு செய்கை வாய்ந்ததால் எனவே. So here, this is the most interesting thing, because here, what is being talked about is the Kumari Kolam. Kumari Kolam here means it is the what you can call the feminine form, the young form. The young form here is about the Shalini. Shalini is a young woman, young priestess of the goddess, and she is very young. Her youthfulness is here talked about as a transitory ephemeral thing. That is why it is Kumari Kolathu. So her very physical youthfulness, the physical youthfulness that you can see, is depicted as something that is ephemeral, and the divine consciousness into which she merges, temporarily even, that divine consciousness of the goddess is said to be eternal. How eternal? It is eternally youthful. So the altered state of consciousness into which the priestess enters is the eternally youthful aspect. Her own physical youthfulness is an ephemeral thing. It is a transitory thing. So here the poet actually inverses something that we perceive as naive reality. Here is where the naive reality gets inversed. Here, the physical reality that you perceive has become a transitory phenomenon, and something that you may consider as something transitory, something that will come and go, her altered state of consciousness, that is considered as eternal and youthful, because for this woman, Shalini, she would have become an old woman and she would have died. So her youthfulness is definitely transitory. Her youthfulness is ephemeral. Her youthfulness does not last forever. But after her, her daughter, or after her, the next priestess, and on and on and on to this day, a woman who gets possessed by the gods. That altered state of consciousness still remains in this land, and it can make the people walk the path of spiritual disciplines, and hence that aspect is eternal. So that you cannot see is eternal, that you can see and that you can feel, and that becomes ephemeral. So this is another one important aspect here. The same way it says, ஆனை தோல் போர்த்து புலியின் உரி உறுத்து காண பெருமை கரந்தனை மேல் நின்றாய வானோர் வழங்க மறைமேல் மறையாகி ஞான கொழுந்தாய் நடுக்கின்றியே நின்றார். Again here, the combination of two aspects is very beautiful. I have already said it, I think, in one of the earlier lectures, that the goddess, a fierce tribal goddess, and the goddess who stands on the scriptures, Maraimel Marayaki, Jnana Kolundai. So here it is said, the scriptures, Vedas are there, they are the scriptures, and the end of those Vedas, the Vedanta, is represented by the Upanishads. So Vedas and Upanishads you have, over the Vedas and Upanishads stands the consciousness, the experience of the consciousness, and that is the divine feminine. So these aspects of the divine feminine have been brought out in Silappatikaram. In Silappatikaram, this aspect of goddess as the end of all gnosis. She herself is the flame of gnosis. She is the end of all gnosis, and she is the experience of the consciousness, and hence all scriptural authority gets subdued by the experience. This aspect is something that has been again and again and again reinforced. Not only in Silappatikaram, but also in the entire Hindu literature, you can see it. Only, perhaps, most probably, the entire human spiritual tradition of the extant traditions. Only in Hindu Dharma, you have this aspect that the scriptural authority is made secondary to the experience of the divine. Everywhere else, if you have to submit yourself to the scriptural authority. If you deviate from the scriptural authority, you will be burnt by the Inquisition. But or you will be stoned to death, as in the case of Analhaq. So, in the case of Hindu tradition, It is made in such a way that the experience of the consciousness is primal and it is the basic. Everything has to be subordinated to it. And for that, they created this wonderful image, the image of the goddess standing on the Vedas. The feet of the goddess is on the head of the Vedas. So, Shruti Simanda Sinduri Krita Padabja Tulika. That is what Sri Lalita Sahasranama says. Her dust in the feet of the goddess is the Simanda of the Vedic mother. Vedas is considered as a mother Vedas, and that Vedas have as their Sindura, the dust of the goddess feet. This way, the divine feminine in Hindu tradition has created a wonderful inner cartography, a spiritual cartography for us to walk. And then, if you look down the different seers who have created a lot of hymns on the goddess in the Saiva tradition, you will find that the goddess is also the basis of what we can call theodiversity. Now, what is theodiversity? It is the recognition of the fact that the human experience of the divine can be of infinite variety. So you cannot say one particular experience of the divine is superior to another experience of the divine. There is no monopolistic tendency among the different spiritual traditions in India. There will be a lot of, you can say, small quarrels. These quarrels actually even beautify the entire spiritual landscape of India. For example, the Saivites and Vaishnavas, they may create literature telling that Shiva is superior to Vishnu and Vishnu is superior to Shiva. And they would say that after all, Vishnu worshipped Shiva. And then the Vaishnavites might say that, oh, the Shiva has the Ganga in his head and the Ganga originates from the feet of Vishnu. So these kind of things, these kind of fightings actually are beautiful conflicts, like small children fighting. And after that, what you have to know is this, that these conflicts never became holy wars. These conflicts never became crusades. These conflicts never became sacred war against each and every tradition, even the Buddhist or the Jain tradition. There have been no basically fight against these traditions that we have to remember. So how does the divine feminine becomes the basis of plurality? I will give one very interesting example for this. In India, the god or the goddess can be considered as a child. When you consider the god or the goddess as the child, the bhakta becomes the parent. Bhakta becomes the parent. The bhakta takes care of the divine. We may consider the god or the goddess as the one who protects the entire universe and the one who has to give us everything. We always go and demand the god or the goddess, give us this, give us that, at least give us enlightenment, all those kind of things. We are on the demanding. But in Hindu tradition, we have this wonderful way of relating ourselves to the divine, not as a person who demands something from the god or the goddess, but as a person who only cares for the goddess, just like the parent cares for the child. So there is a beautiful passage in the Saivite hymns. It says, "Kachavin manam pola kasinduriki venduvan." Like a mother cow crying for the child, for the calf. Like that, I would call for you. So it is like, think about it. You are not the calf, you are the mother cow, and you are crying for the calf. That way I am going to call you. That is the way you relate. The same way you also relate to the goddess as a child. She is the mother of all universe, but you consider her as a child, a small child. And in Tamil literary tradition, the child always has to be taken care of in different stages in different ways. This is called Pillai Tamil. In Pillai Tamil, you have different stages. The stage in which the child stands, the stage in which you have to oil the child and make the body parts of the child very flexible. You make the child clap her hands, you make the child walk. So each and every aspect of this child, as the child grows through each and every stage, a parent always feels a unique pleasure. That pleasure never again comes. When your child first walked, the pleasure that you derived from it, the happiness that you derived from it is not again going to come ever in your life. But here, what the mystics and mystic poets did in Tamil culture is that they created these stages and they sang songs towards the divine, towards the god or the gods. One person who specialized in this wonderfully is Kumara Gurubar. Now, Kumara Gurubar himself was an autistic child. He couldn't talk for all till he was 5 or 6 years old, and then they took him to Tiruchendur Murugan. And which is because of the grace of Murugan, they went through a lot of finances and this, and through his grace, he started giving exquisite poetry, and he became one of the greatest Saivite seeds. He came to Varanasi, and in Varanasi, he established a Saivite monastery. At that time, the king who was ruling was actually Tara Shugo. So he had sung Pillai Tamil for the goddess Meenakshi. And there is one stage in which the child starts playing with the small crystal-like balls. The child, if you have seen in when we were small children, we could see that in villages and all, they will have 5 or 6 pebbles, small crystal-like pebbles. They would throw one pebble, they would take one pebble from the ground. Both with the same hand, they have to do it. Quickly, they have to do it again and again and again. It is like juggling, but it is not juggling. They would be doing it. That is one stage of the child's development. Just you can relate this to Jean Piaget if you want, but it's a very interesting, though it is only a literary technique, you can actually relate it. You have a premonition of Jean Piaget's theory here. Nevertheless, so the child plays this. The goddess Meenakshi is playing. So when the goddess Meenakshi is playing this, she throws this wonderful spatika, the crystal, prism-like crystal-like pebble up. So when it goes, it comes down. And when it comes down, when it goes, for example, her hair reflects on it. Her hair is very black. So when people look at it, it looks like a black pearl actually. And then it comes down and it now reflects her teeth. And so her teeth is very white. So they think that it is some kind of a pearl or something. And then it goes to her hand. Her hand is very red. So when it touches it, they think that it is a kind of a red gem. So the same way, he says, when he says, it is like, everybody says, each time the color of the crystal changes, the pebble changes, the person who is looking at it attributes a quality of a particular gem to that crystal pebble, the crystalline pebble. Then Kumara Gurubar says it is like each person belonging to a particular religion attributing to the divine those aspects of his religion which he considers as special. So, Kaimalari Koli Kalimut Tammani Nakimut Tolitoya Kandava Nitka Pirar Silar Chengi Kamala Chudor Kaduva Chemmanigi Chedilitana Yenavum Sichila Katkadagin Chevigi Vavigi Pinkar Manigi Chedana Kolanavum Tammana Muppa Urepana Machi Samaya Tamimubera. So they tell this is how the divine is, and they reject what the other religion says. They tell, no, that religion is wrong. Only what my religion says is right. The divine is only according to my religion. It cannot be like in the other religion. So actually what they are doing is they are defining the divine to a particular framework, to their theological framework. And that is what they do. தம்மனமொப்பு உரைப்பன மற்றை சமய தமையுகரார் தத்தமினின்று பிதற்றுவ பொருவ தனிமுதல் யாம் என்பார் அம்மனை யாயவர் தம்மனை யானவர் ஆடுக அம்மனையே. So here is the most beautiful twist here. So this each and every religious person is saying that the religion only belongs to me, and that is actually the divine play. That too is divine play. Each person claiming the divine to its own religious framework. Even that aspect that arises in their mind, that too belongs to the divine, and such a divine person is whom? It is the Shiva, and this Shiva is nobody else but the beloved of the goddess, and that goddess is playing this game. So here you can see this, the way the divine feminine and the pluralism get united. The pluralism is accepted. Not only the pluralism is accepted, the tendency to go against the pluralism, the tendency for monopolistic religion, that is also not hated. See this, there is no binary. There is not even the binary of fighting against monopolistic religion. They say that we can understand this monopolistic religion, we can place it in this particular aspect in the larger scheme of things, and we can understand. And that way, we make them understand the higher reality, to make them understand that they are also nothing but one small movement in the great dance of the cosmos. When you understand this, even when you are fighting against the monopolistic tendencies, you won't have hatred against it. You'll be able to understand. You'll be able to understand why they are doing it. They are not doing it out of hatred for you. They are doing it out of a misplaced understanding of the reality. You have to correct that misplaced understanding of the reality rather than hating those people. So this is another one aspect that the divine feminine has added to the entire spiritual landscape of India. This way, the divine feminine has been again and again and again making our spiritual inner growth positive. Number one. Number two, it has also been able to make us create a culture in which we can allow the evolution of the divine feminine into all its manifestations. And there is the third aspect. The third aspect is this. It is in a way related also to theodiversity, that the goddess can be seen in the manifestation of everything, all divine aspects, all divine aspects. When you relate, when you ground or when you anchor your concept of divine in the divine feminine, even if you are worshipping a masculine god, whether you are worshipping Shiva, or whether you are worshipping Vishnu, or whether you are worshipping Muruga, you can always anchor that, you can always root it into the substratum of the divine feminine. This is the third aspect of divine feminine you have here. This aspect is essentially shown in Arunagirinathar. So in Arunagirinathar, just a minute. So in Arunagirinathar, you have a very, very beautiful song. It is called Devendra Sangha Vahupu. So in Devendra Sangha Vahupu, what Arunagirinathar does is, he is a great devotee of Muruga. Arunagirinathar is a very great devotee of Muruga. So he always sings only Muruga. Even when he is thinking about Ganesha, he would bring Muruga into it. But here is a very wonderful, beautiful song called Devendra Sangha Vahupu. And Tirumuruga Kripananda Varyar, who was a great devotee of Arunagirinathar, used to say that this Devendra Sangha Vahupu contains the essence of Sri Vidya Upasana. Goes like this. Taraniyin Araniya Muranira Niyan Udal Thani Naga Nudi Godu Sadong Nedungiri Odendu Payangari. The first line is this. Taranigil Araniya Muran Iraniya Muran. So it talks about Kranya, Kranyagasi. Taranigil Araniya Muran Iraniya Muran Taran Naganuti Kodu Chadong Nedingil. We all know that Hiranyakasipu was killed by Vishnu. But here Arunagirinatha says it was not Vishnu who killed Hiranyakasipu, it is the goddess who killed Hiranyakasipu. And the word he uses is very beautiful. She is using her fingernails to kill him. It is like double check in the chess game. Of course, we know that the Narasimha came and killed him with his fingernails. And also in Lalita Sahasranama, it is said, Karangli Nahotpanna Narayana Dasaguti. So it is from her fingernails that all the 10 emanations of Vishnu came. And here Arunagirinatha uses both. And then he goes on. Taranigil Arani Mura Niran Nudal Buddha, Tarong Nedingiri Charung Bayangiri, Tamaruga Paripura, Voli Bodu, Nadanavil, Charaniya Chatumari, Tadambuya Mandira Vedanta Paramba. So she is the kind of the goddess whose legs contain the essence of Vedas. She is dancing, and for dancing, what she has in her legs are the very Vedas. They are sounding her in her legs. So here again you see the same thing. The scriptural authority being subdued to the divine feminine. The scriptural authority becomes anklets in her legs when she is doing the dance. And she is the one who is going to take care of the entire universe because of her infinite compassion. Because of her infinite compassion, what she does, because of that, she subsists the entire earth itself. Because of her compassion, the oceans are doing their work. That is what Arunagirinatha says. The oceans are doing their work because she is there and she is regulating the oceans. And she is the green goddess. It's a very interesting thing that he says that she is the green goddess. And because of this particular aspect that she is a green goddess is something that comes to us from the Vedas again. In the Vedas, there is a goddess, the goddess who is taking care of the forest. She is called as the goddess who is clothed in green. And in Tamil Nadu, you have a goddess called Pachayamman. So this Pachayamman goddess is the goddess who takes care of the vegetations and everything. And she also has Sapta Matrika. She has Sapta Matrika also along with her. And it is this goddess who Ramana Maharishi, who was a great Advaitic Jnani who worshipped, he worshipped this particular goddess. And hence, this aspect of the goddess. Now I will tell you a very interesting another aspect here. I think it is in one of the South American countries, Peru or Brazil. For a long time, the natives were deprived of the land, and the Spanish were holding all the land. And at what point, Bolivia, I think, at one particular point of time, they decided that we would give back the land to them. This was published in the magazine called Geo in 2008 or 2009. And when they gave that land, the native people, they were not very much interested in working on the land. The reason was, they said, during the Spanish conquest, the Catholic Inquisition has completely destroyed all their native goddesses, and one of the goddesses was named Pachama. The goddess was the goddess who was related to agriculture. And because all the rituals related to the Pachama had gone, the farmers, they didn't find any interest in taking over the land and doing the fishing, doing the farming. They couldn't have an innate interest in relation to the land. So they were trying now to revive the entire thing by again re-exploring the Pachama goddess tradition. When I read this, at once I related this to the Pachayamman that we worship. How fortunate we are that we have the goddess tradition in each and every aspect of our life. Mahakavi Kampan, there is a very beautiful series of songs on goddess Saraswati related to Kambanatalva. We attributed to Kambanatalva. We actually don't know whether it was written by Kambanatalva or not, but surely it should be not less than 600 years, and children recite it again and again, and it says, Vedam, Vedatin Antamum, Andatin Meepurulam Vedam, Vedatin Markamum, Marka Pinakkarukum Bodamum, Boda Uruvahi, Engum Podinda Vindu Nadam, Nada Vandarkum, Ventamari Nagi. The lines, the meaning of this is Vedamu, the Vedas, Vedatin Andamu, the end of the Vedas, that is the Vedanta. Andatin Meipurulam Vedam. Now comes the interesting part. Andatin Meipurulam Vedam. So, when we think of Vedanta, we always think of kind of a unity, an identity with everything. But here, Kamban says, Vedatin Andam, Andatin Meipurulam Vedam. The diversity that you see around you, that diversity is not illusion. That diversity is a kind of a true emanation of Vedantic aspect of the reality. So the Vedam that you see, the diversity, the different things, the plurality of the existence that you see, it is not something that you dismiss as illusory. It is also a true emanation of the divine feminine. Vedam, Vedatin Markam. And when you have these different things, then naturally there will be different traditions. There will be a lot of different traditions. When you have diversity, you have diverse traditions. Marka Pinakkarkum Bodam. Naturally, when you have different diverse traditions, you have a lot of conflicts between these traditions. A lot of conflicts between these traditions. But you should have the ability to go above these conflicts. That is the Bodham. Bodham is the consciousness, the awareness. So, Marka Pinakkarukkum Bodham. Marka Pinakku means the conflict between the traditions. So, you have to have the awareness to resolve or not to engage in the conflicts between the traditions. Marka Pinakkarukkum Bodhamum, Bodha Uruvahi Engum Podinda Vindu Nadamu. Now, note this. From the Vedas, he comes and then he comes to the Bodham, which is the awareness, and that awareness stems from what? From the Nadam and the Vindu, the basic binary that is at the base. And this binary is also again united in the Brahman. So, Nadamu, Marka Pinakkarukkum Bodhamu, Bodha Uruvahi Engum Podinda Vindu Nadamu, Nada Vandarkum Ventamari Nayige. And then the awareness, the consciousness is described in the form of a small bee. Wonder is a small bee. It is doing the ringaram, and it is the small bee. And this is how we see the divine feminine from the Vedas to the consciousness that is the bee that goes through the entire existence. And this aspect of the divine feminine, that it can arise, harmonize, it can arise above all conflicts. It can harmonize the theodiversity, and it can also make you aware of the real reality that is within all the manifest reality. So if you are going to take the manifest reality at its face value, then you can never be a deeper person. Then you can never be a person of good science or good art. If you are a good artist, you should be able to go beyond what you see and relate in an artistic way to it. So you should be able to see in a grain of sand the entire universe. That is what Yasoda saw. That is what Blake wrote about, William Blake wrote about, right? To see eternity in 1 second, or to see the entire universe in a small grain of sand. So when Yasoda saw into the grains of sand inside the little infant Krishna's mouth, what she saw the entire universe. That is the kind of artistic ability that you should have If you don't have that, if you have this concept of naive reality, then you become a very shallow person. Here I have to say, perhaps a small divergence, I have to say this. Unfortunately, today we have a social pathology called a pseudo-rationalism. This pseudo-rationalism, they take everything at face value. They ask questions like this. Like, for example, how can you open the mouth and you can see the entire universe in a small child's mouth? You have to ask, if you have the vision of a William Blake, you will be able to see it. And your ancestors have given you, this ability for the vision of William Blake in each and every bhakta. In each and every bhakta of Vishnu, they have given this. Each and every reader of Bhagavatam, a granny who may be illiterate, but if she understands Bhagavatam's spirit, then she has the same spirit of William Blake. You don't have to go to university to have that in India. You can just have it in the street. By the street, you can have. So this is the kind of spirituality they created. When you have naive reality, then you have pseudo rationality, then you live a life that is not at all a life. That is for an artist. For the scientist also, he should be able to go inside the deeper realities. He should be able to penetrate the veil and see things for himself. And when he sees that, then he will be able to understand. As I said, all cultures, irrespective of what that culture is, they have the concept of divine feminine. Think about the fact that the very word matter has a deep relation to the word mother. So when we start Om Sri Matre Namaha, we essentially take all this into consideration. The word meter, that is to measure the matter, it all are related to the root word mother. So matter is not something illusory. Matter is the thing from which we all come. And hence, if we approach matter with the proper sense of humility and reverence, then the matter will reveal herself. That is what has been happening. If you look at the quantum mechanics these days, you find this particular aspect that the matter can reveal her reality to us, can reveal her secrets to us. The way we approach her depends upon the way we approach her. During the Cartesian period, we developed methods to the kind of imagery they used was bind the nature to a kind of a torture wheel and extract all the truths from her. Of course, that we have miserably failed. So again, if you are a scientist, if you invite this divine feminine, you will be able to approach her with great humility. And the insights that you have, whether it is poetic or scientific, whether it is mystic or whether it is spiritual in your own sadhana, you need the divine feminine as a grace, as a kind of, in fact, the correct word is Arul. Arul is in our tradition, the Arul is the Sakti Nibada, the God is descending into you, making the Kundalini ascent. So in this way, the divine feminine is something that exists in a very integral way to our entire spiritual discourse. And that discourse is something that we have to understand very clearly. If we understand that, then we will realize that everybody is part of this divine feminine. And as the Upanishad says, when you realize that particular aspect, then there is no way you can hate another person. There is no way, of course, if you have to even fight the battle, you can fight the battle without hatred. You can fight the battle in the proper way. That is a very important aspect of the divine feminine. And when we understand that, then we can march in the field of our choice with a proper rhythm, in tune with the rhythm. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Thank you very much for agreeing to spend this evening and share your knowledge with us, Aravindanji. I request all the participants to come back tomorrow at 6:30 for a talk by Manoj Pavitran on Neelakanta, which is also the theme for Tantrotsav 2021. Namaste. Thank you.